to the first episode of 2019. I can't quite believe we are at 2019, but here we are. On this episode, I am chatting to Jeff Martin. Jeff is a motivational speaker, a podcaster, and father. He's also a police officer and an author. His first children's book is called Brothers from the Six, Sisters from the Six, Role Models in My Community. If you're a Drake fan, you'll know that the six is the cool way of saying Toronto, the T-dot. Jeff's book profiles Black professionals who have grown up in Toronto and have gone on to do great things with their lives. It's inspirational and accessible, and we chat about what it's like growing up in a priority neighborhood, I'm using air quotes, which both of us did, why he wrote the book, why he became a police officer. One of the interesting things Jeff said to me that isn't in the podcast is that proportionally, it's the education system, not policing, that will have the greatest detrimental impact on a Black child's life. There's a lot to unpack in that statement. We know about the school to prison pipeline. I think that's a whole other podcast. There's truth in that statement. And that's why I have so much anxiety anyway around the education system. But it was a really interesting statement and a different way of looking at how Black lives intersect with powerful systems. So I wanted to share that with everyone. I also wanted to say that Jeff is just the second man that I have had on the Woke Mommy Chatter podcast. So I'm trying to rectify that. But I've provided links in the show notes on how to find Jeff Martin. You can visit his website at jeffadmartin.com, or you can follow him on the social channels, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at jeffadmartin, JEFFAD Martin. Here's our conversation.
Can you talk about the six? So we're talking about Toronto, but the six is, I think that's a Drake thing, right?
Well, Drake has definitely made it popular. However, if you go back to a little bit of history with Toronto, Toronto used to be a smaller city. And Toronto eventually made itself a mega city. So it combined the neighborhoods of Etobicoke, North York, Scarborough, York, East York, and Old Toronto. They all came together. So 6 municipalities came together to make Toronto as we know it today. So the whole term, the six, kind of stems from there. But of course, my man Jersey made it cool and he made it world known. And that's why it's blown up to where it has today. And, as you know, growing up in Toronto, Toronto can be an amazing city. It's such a multicultural type city. You can be in one hub. You can be at an intersection and you can get Jamaican food, Ethiopian food, Italian food, Greek food, all within a block. Yeah. And it just makes it such an amazing city, the way we can come together in that aspect. But again, as we talked about before, there's certain areas that really could use a little bit of help. Use a lot of help.
Yeah.
And, again, with this book, I'm hoping to do that. But with everything I do, whether it be motivational speaking, whether it be the podcast that I do, Motivating from the Six, everything that I do, my goal is to, even my nonprofit organization, Brothers from the Six, my goal is to try to help some of these kids, again, to recognize their value, to see their worth, and to overcome some of the fears that they face within their life.
Tell me about your nonprofit. What do you do? What work do you do?
Yeah, so Brothers from the Six is a nonprofit organization that I do head up, and we really try to get involved in the community and help out people where we can. And so we've been blessed to do a number of different projects. A couple summers ago, we did #100 sandwiches, where we gave out meals to people who were in need. We also, over the Christmas season, we were able to give out gift certificates or gift cards to families who could use a little bit of extra help as well during the holiday season. And then we've also been involved with a program just at the end of August before school, where we gave out free backpacks and haircuts to kids as well in some of the tougher neighborhoods as well. Just giving the parents an extra opportunity just to spend that money elsewhere instead of spending it on a haircut and in a backpack, and giving these kids a bit of a confidence booster when they walk into the first day of school. So that's some of the things that we've done, and we have so many things in store that we would like to do. the book, Brothers from the Six, from the Six Role Models of My Community, all the proceeds from that book will go towards Brothers from the Six nonprofit organization, because we're looking to fund a number of different things. And so I created the book to bring funding so we can do a lot more things and bring a lot more opportunities to some of the kids within our community.
Wow, that's amazing. You're doing amazing work. I think it's awesome when you can see like the work that you're doing is just so tangible. And I want to just talk a little bit about the dedication in the book, Brothers from the Six. And I loved as it says, so I do what I do because of you. I guess these are your three kids. And then you say, my ceiling is your floor. My ceiling is your floor. I love that. I love that. Can you talk a little bit about why you put that in there, what that saying means to you?
You know, I don't know what your background is specifically, but my parents are from Jamaica, and they came to Canada at some point, met here, got married. And, I'm so grateful and thankful that they made that decision, because I know that my life would be so different if they stayed in Jamaica and I was raised in Jamaica. And, there's people who are doing some great things and striving in Jamaica, but I live in a land of opportunity. In Canada, in the US, any first world country, you live in a land of opportunity. We are in a place and time now where you can sit at home and make money. Like, back in the day, you always had to go into the brick and mortar. You always had to go into a job. But nowadays, with the social media that's out there, with media, with the internet, you can sit at home and make money. You can create online businesses and never leave your house if you choose not to, and pay your bills and make more money than our parents have. And so, I realize and recognize, my parents, whenever they pass away, whenever that might be, my parents aren't leaving me an inheritance. I wasn't blessed with that. My parents weren't blessed with that. But the opportunity that they've given me to be here in Canada is bigger than anything else. And so I recognize that I have to push and strive to create a life for myself so I can leave it for my children. And so everything that I do, when I push and I push and I can create the highest level, the highest ceiling that I can create for myself, my children know that they can start there. That will be their floor. So the fact that I've created a book, it's now not a big deal for my children. So, my children can look at it and say to their friends, what, your dad didn't create a book? My dad created a book, not a big deal. And so perhaps they may create a book. When I introduce my children to stock investments, they can tell their friends, what, your parents don't do that? It's not a big deal in my house. So, it's important that everything that we do as individuals, as parents, as elders in the community, we pass it on to the next generation, because they are able to take it just like a baton and continue running. They don't have to start at the beginning, just like where my parents started. My parents took the baton, they ran and took it to where they could, and I've taken it and ran it even further. My job is to run it as far as I can take it before I leave this world, and then my children take it over from there. So that's what I mean when I say my ceiling is their floor.
I love that.
Whenever my children get an allowance or birthday money, they put it together. And then at a certain time of year, we split it into three parts. We have a spend, we have a donate, and we have an invest. And what we do is the spend, they can spend it on whatever they want. So the last set, they spend it on Lego and a book. Donate, we donated to a local food shelter. And then invest, I said, what do you guys want to invest in? And we spoke about investment opportunities. And they chose, not me, they chose that they wanted to invest in Nike, and not to buy shoes to put on their feet, but to invest in the stock. And so now my 5-year-old, I can go to him and say, where's Nike stock at right now? And he knows to pick up the iPad and to ask Siri, what's Nike stock at? And he could tell me what we bought it for and where it is now. And these are the lessons that we're able to show to our children. So they don't understand, again, the concept of, I want you to be better than me. They don't grasp that at the young age, but they're grasping the lessons that we teach them.
That's awesome. That's a great legacy. My story is I grew up in Jane and Finch, so I grew up in an underserved or priority neighborhood. And my parents, I grew up there. My parents, we lived there until I left to go to school to university. And then my parents moved out of the area. So they moved like literally when I was finished school. But that's where I grew up. That's where it's home for me. I think what caught me about your book was this idea of, there are people who come from these neighborhoods and they're doing well. And I know that, right? And you know that.
Yes.
But I'm always
Yes.
interested in this narrative that there is of like there's no hope, which is so bizarre to me because everyone I know who grew up in where I grew up is just doing fine, right? And of course there
Yes.
would like everything there are stories where people are not doing so well, but for the most part I think there's a lot of hope and there's still opportunities, and I just found that really interesting in your book, which is why I wanted to reach out to you. Um,
Oh,
but I
thank you
guess we'll
so
start by
much. Yeah, I
talking
agree.
who you are. So tell me a little bit about your story.
Yeah, so I grew up in a very similar neighborhood to yours, just down the road. I grew up in Rexdale, which can be a tough neighborhood as well in the city of Toronto. And, I grew up around, unfortunately, a lot of violence, a lot of gang violence, a lot of drug activity, a lot of negativity and poverty. And, during my time there, there's a lot of lessons that you learn, a lot of street lessons that you learn, and not always good. But I recognized something that there were people who were in the community who were loving, people who just wanted the best for their family. And I do believe that in those type of communities, that's the majority of people who live there even to this day. And so I always had this zeal, this push in my heart to want to help and to want to make a difference within my community. And so growing up in that type of circumstance, I wouldn't trade it for the world because it's allowed me to see that sometimes people are they feel like they're put in situations where they really have to extend themselves and do certain things, and it's not always the best things that they choose to do, but they do it because in the end their heart's in the right place of trying to take care of their family. And for me, I always wanted to be that type of person to give back, and so um, again, growing up in that type of situation and having my own struggles growing up has led me to where I am today, where everything that I do now is all about serving. It's all about helping people get through the difficult circumstances. It's all about helping people to step through their fears and find their best self. And I'm driven in everything I do to help people in their circumstances.
And you do that. I mean, you're a police officer too, so you do that quite literally for your job, right?
Absolutely, I do. Yes, and a lot of people, uh, I don't blame people. A lot of people have, when they think about a police officer, they have a perception in their mind. They have the perception of the time they were pulled over and they're harassed. And I've been there many, many, many times as well. However, I recognized something at a young age that when the police officers were coming in the neighborhoods and they were harassing myself and friends as well at a young age, I recognized that they had a certain level of power. They had a certain level of respect. They walked into the room and everybody knew it. And I thought to myself, how amazing would it be if somebody had that type of power, that type of respect, but they actually used it to improve the community. And so even at a young age, it always crossed my mind that, maybe being a police officer would be the way to go because you have such an influence on people. And, being now in the police service now for 14 years. It's been I've been blessed to deal with people, not just within the realms of wearing a uniform and driving around a police cruiser. To be honest, I haven't done that for years. I work in the offices now, dealing with victims of crime, of sexual assault, of children who've been abused is what I've been doing over the last number of years. And I've really had the opportunity to speak to people and to actually walk in the path that I believe I was designed to walk in to help people in their circumstances.
So we're going to get to the book in a minute, but I have two questions. So the first is, so we grew up in similar neighborhoods, but it's interesting to hear you describe your neighborhood because I never described Jane Finch like that, right? As violence prone, right? Because I didn't see that growing up, and I think I guess credit is due to my parents because we were very sheltered, and it was two girls, just me and my sister. Do you think that it's different for boys growing up in difficult communities? Um, I remember being in high school arguing with the teacher who was questioning me about like where we lived. And I was saying to her, like, I never see, there's like no drugs. I never see that. I don't. And it's only now as an adult, sometimes if I go back, I can recognize certain things. But as a child growing up, I didn't see all of the stuff that you heard on the news. Like I didn't, that was so foreign to me. It didn't
Right.
equal where I lived. So I just wonder if part of that was being well, yes, being so sheltered, but being a girl. And do you think that had I been a boy growing up in an environment like that, it would have been different?
That's hard to say because now that I get an opportunity to really go out, so one of the things I do now, I am a empowerment speaker, and I'm blessed with the opportunity to go out and to speak to kids in schools and high schools and colleges, elementary schools, and I find that kids are dealing with a lot, and I'm not sure in terms of with you and how you were able to get through life not really dealing with that stuff, which is absolutely fabulous. I think it's a credit to your parents and what they've done for you guys. Um, but I find that whether it be boy or girl, there's a lot of kids in these neighborhoods who are struggling and they're trying to find their identity. And oftentimes when they're looking for identity and they're not finding it in the right places, they look for it in the wrong places. And so
Mm,
now they're seeing the people around them, whether it be the drug dealers, whether it be the pimps, or what they see within the music videos, and some of the influencers. That's what many of them replicate, whether it is a boy or a girl. And I've met many young men and young women who found themselves lost based on following the wrong crowd and the wrong influencers.
yeah. So when you were growing up and looking for role models, why was policing it why did you gravitate towards that police? You talked about the respect that you saw like police officers get in the community. Was that the main reason, or like what really kind of pulled you towards that? Because it just for me, I think I don't know, thinking about policing and then growing up in communities like Malvern or Jane and Finch or it doesn't they don't go together.
Right.
And I think there's there's like a even for me as a person who I live, way up north, but even that relationship, when you see a police officer or someone, it's just it's tense. So
Yes.
why did you gravitate towards that? Being a young black man from the six, from why did you gravitate towards policing?
Well, I think it's important that we look at we recognize that we are often influenced by the people around us. And so one of the things I did with this book, and we can get into a sec we can get in it in a second, but one of the things I did with this book, I wanted to show young kids that there are black doctors and lawyers and entrepreneurs and judges. When I was growing up, I was not surrounded by judges and doctors who look like me. And
Hmm.
I was surrounded by real hardworking people, including my parents, and unfortunately, we were surrounded by police. And, I would often see the police. Again, as a young man, I didn't get into much trouble, but I had my share of harassment as well. And friends harassed and such. And so we often saw police. And even though it was a negative um, interaction that I would often have, there was still an influence that I had picked up at that age. And again, for me to look at it even at that young age and say to myself, you know, the influence that they have, the power that they possess, if someone was able to take that and to use it for good, how different would the relationships be in the community? How much can somebody strive based on them using the same type of power for good? And so for me, again, it really came down to influence. And so if I was surrounded by a number of black doctors, then perhaps I'd be a doctor. And I even say that to this day. If you're looking to be a millionaire, then surround yourself with millionaires because that's what's going to influence you the most. And
Hmm.
so, for me, again, I think that's one of the things, the key elements that kind of led me down that path, because I just often saw them. But I was intelligent even at that young age enough to know that using that type of ability to make a change in the community can go so much further than just the typical harassment that many young men and women face with police.
So tell me about the book. How did you go about, I guess, selecting the people in the book? And then can you talk a little bit about some of the people that are profiled in the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am so proud of this project. This came out in October of 2018. It's something I've been working on for almost 2.5 years. And again, the whole idea of this book is it started from, again, me going out and being an empowerment and motivational speaker and having the opportunity to go into a lot of different schools and speak to the youth, whether it be in big groups or small groups, one-on-one mentoring. And one of the problems that I found was that many of our youth were not seeing positive role models, both females and males, not seeing positive role models. And it was important for me to show them that there are people from their community who are doing some fabulous, some amazing, like world changing things. And so I
Mhm.
wanted to bring that to them. One of the programs that I run at a high school, even to this day, I've been doing it for 4 years now. I bring professionals, Black professionals, to these students to show them what a doctor looks like, what an entrepreneur looks like. And I would love to go into every single school within the greater Toronto area, and even in Canada. But obviously that's not feasible. That's not something I'm able to do physically. So I thought, how about I widen it in another direction, in another way? And that's how the book came to be. And so within the book, as I mentioned, there are real life people who are doing some really great work within the city. And so, for example, I have a real life police officer, Keith Merritt. I have a real life firefighter, which, if you look at the Toronto firefighting service, there's not a lot of Black people working in that field. But a friend of mine, Al DeSant, I was able to illustrate him and show him in the book. We have a Black judge in this book as well, Donald McLeod,
Mhm.
and the list goes on and on. And we have both females and males giving these kids an opportunity to see that there's people who grew up in very similar neighborhoods to them and are striving, are doing great things, are changing the community, changing the world. And I wanted them to have the opportunity to see that these people exist.
Yeah, I think it's that, you have to see it to be it. And I think people who don't grow up in situations like that, or if you're not part of like an equity seeking group, you don't understand what it is not to see yourself, and how impactful it is to be invisible, like not to see yourself anywhere. And so I love that. Like I read the book to my kids, and I love that they are able to see these people who are attainable, and that they're people who are like they're present, right? Like it's not about history, or they're here, they're doing this work, and they're doing it now. It's not being surrounded by, or not seeing the people who are doing amazing things in your community, and then not knowing how to get there. It feels sometimes like it's so distant and so far.
Absolutely, Carrie. And it really comes down to us having an exposure to something that we weren't exposed to before. I often say that I have 3 sons, and my sons may never know that they have the ability of becoming a doctor until I expose them to it.
Hmm.
And when you expose them to something or someone who has a resemblance to them. So to be honest with you, it doesn't even have to be just about your skin color. If you can see yourself in somebody, whether it be their mannerisms, whether it be where they're from, whether it be the way they speak, whatever it is, if you can see yourself in someone, that's going to give you an opportunity now to say, well, maybe I can do what they're doing. So now perhaps my children can, at one point may have never thought that they can be a biochemist. But when I introduce them to a biochemist who they can see themselves in, they now know that they can work in that same field. They can now walk that same path because someone who resembles them in some fashion is doing that job as well. And one of the things I love to talk about is, if you remember, I don't know how old you are, Carrie, but if we kind of go back to the late 80s and early 90s, when there's a TV show on called The Cosby Show.
Yeah,
And the main
I remember that.
character,
Yeah.
okay. So the main character would always wear sweaters that had Black colleges and universities on the logo on the shirt.
Hmm.
And then going forward from there, that show had a spinoff called A Different World. And A Different World was based in a Black college, in a Black university of Hillman. And during that time, when those two TV shows were on, where an average college university in the United States, and I apologize, I don't have the stats with me now, but where they were getting a certain percent, I think it was 21% of children applying. At that time, for the first time in many years since desegregation, Black colleges and universities went up about 32%.
Mm.
So it showed it was a direct correlation to what was being watched. It was a direct correlation to the main TV shows that were on at the time, The Cosby Show, and Different World. And the fact that we saw ourselves in a positive light, these TV shows made it cool to want to go to a black college university. And so, people like you and I, at that time frame, were running in droves to apply to go to a black college university.
Yeah.
It's because they saw a positive image of themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to. A lot of our children, especially in some of our neighborhoods that are neglected, they don't get an opportunity to see the positive imagery of themselves. They don't see the judges. They don't see the entrepreneurs. And that's what's missing. And again, my book, I'm with one book, will it change the world? No, but my plan is to have it go into every classroom and every home of every child who needs to see a positive image of themselves. And that's exactly what I want to expose these children.
Yeah. And it's not just the kids. It's not just kids from those neighborhoods, and it's also kids just generally need to see positive images of people of color, right? Particularly Black people. They need to see that too. So I think it's important for even kids at schools where there are not very many minority students, that they see that too. What's the one thread that you see kind of going with all of the people that you profiled in the book? What's like the one thing that maybe they have in common, or the one takeaway from all of them?
I would say that, all of them strive to become their best self, and not one of them gave up. And to become a school administrator, to become a chef, to become an Olympic athlete, are just some of the people that were in the book. To do that type of level of in your career, you really have to strive to become your best, not give up. And we all know that life's going to bring obstacles. That's one of the things that we know for sure. But, despite the obstacles, they decided that they weren't going to quit. And because they're doing some fabulous things, they caught my attention to have them in the book. And so I would say that's a common thread in anything that you're doing. You have to be passionate about it. If you are passionate about it, then keep going, keep pushing. It doesn't matter if you're not getting as many likes on social media. It doesn't matter if, you're not really getting the attention of the people that you're hoping to get the attention to. That will come if you're passionate, but stay focused, stay driven. And I could tell you, everybody that I approached to be in this book, they were ecstatic that I even approached them. And it's because they stayed focused, they stayed driven. And here they were, at this point now, they're illustrated, in my book, because they continue to stay on the path and to not give up. And I'd say that's a common thread with everybody who's.
I love that it's not just Brothers from the Six, there's Sisters from the Six too. And you just kind of flip the book over, and then it's Sisters from the Six. So why was that important to make sure that women were profiled in this book as well?
Oh, because we're in this thing together. We're in this thing together. Men and women, we're in this thing together. And I wanted to make sure I combined the two books. So as you talked about, it is a 2-in-1 book. One side's Brothers from the Six, but there is no back cover of the book when you flip it over. That's Sisters from the Six. And I did some research when I was creating this book. And they say, for example, young boys will watch Superman, for example, but they won't watch Supergirl. Where young girls will watch Supergirl or Superwoman, but they'll also watch Superman. So I wanted to make sure that the boys had the exposure of the girls as well. That's why I combined the book, so that our young boys can't run away from it. But number two, I wanted to make sure I covered our young girls as well, because again, just being within the school systems, having the ear of some of these young kids, I've heard some stories and situations that many of these kids don't even want to tell their parents. And a lot of these young girls are struggling. They're struggling with identity. They're struggling with looking or trying to fit in. They're struggling to figure out where they belong in this world. And, again, I'm not looking to leave anybody out. Our young women are just as important as our young men. And, there's so many future leaders that I see within these young kids. And I want to make sure that they all have the opportunity to see the positive imagery of themselves out there. With girls, the game is so different, because with guys, we kind of get up and we do our thing. With women, women are forced to look at the imagery that is shown on TV, such as the makeup commercials, the beauty commercials, the magazines. And oftentimes our young Black girls are not shown in those type of circumstances. So here they are battling with, am I pretty? Do I look like what everybody else looks like? Do I have the same shapes and figures and hips as some of the celebrities do? And so, I know our young girls are struggling with that piece of it as well. And again, I just wanted to make sure that everybody was included and just to give them an opportunity to see some positive imagery of themselves right within their city of Toronto.
What's your hope for the story, for the book now?
Well, I continue to push this one. Like I said, it came out in October. So my goal is just to, as I mentioned, I want to get it into every single school. I want to get it into every single home of every child who could be influenced by this book. That is my goal. And, some might say that's an audacious goal, but that's, I think you got to dream big. That's my goal, number one. Number two, yeah, I have definitely contemplated in doing a second book, but within 2019, I'm actually working on 2 other books that I'm hoping that will be out sometime within 2019. One is my own self-help book where I'm speaking to adults to help them through the difficult circumstances, and another book where it's 10 men, 10 authors who have all come together, and we are writing about a situation that we've been through and how we fell down, but more importantly, how we were able to get back up. And that's what's on the plate. That's what's in the pipeline for 2019. But the children's book, yeah, I'm definitely contemplating how to sculpt the next part or the next version of Brothers from the Six, Sisters from the Six, Role Models of My Community children's book.
That's awesome.
I just want to let the people know, the listeners know, that whatever it is that you're doing, just continue to go and keep going. And, sometimes we go through some real difficulties in life. Life can be real difficult, as I said before, but we got to keep going. And, oftentimes we can use the difficult times that we have that we're going through as fuel. We can use that to really push us forward. And, if we have a minute here, I'd like to talk about real quick, 2005 for me. 2005 was, I like to say, the best year of my life, and it was also the worst year of my life. In 2005, I was hired as a police officer. And like I talked about, the influence that I had, the negative influence of policing around me as a kid, but I recognized that there was opportunity there to help the community. And so I worked at it really hard and became a police officer in 2005. And I was excited. I was elated because of this goal that I was able to achieve. But just 15 days later, after being hired as a police officer, one of my cousins, Omar McLeod, at the age of 23, was murdered within the streets of Toronto. And so growing up in a difficult neighborhood, I learned a lot of difficult lessons. And one of the lessons that I learned back then was revenge. And so here I was caught in a rock and a hard place, as they say, where, part of me, I swore that I was going to protect and serve. But there's the other side of me that wanted to go out there and get revenge and have the family of the murderers feel the exact pain that myself and my family were going through. And this is a battle that I went through for a long time. And, I didn't care that I had this job. Like, in the end, I was tired of seeing what was going on in our communities, and the pain that I saw in the eyes of my family was just devastating. And so that's why I really went back and forth with the whole revenge thing. But ultimately, I had a conversation with someone that said to me, Jeff, you got to understand, sometimes the hardest things in life, that's where you're going to find your lessons. That's where you're going to find the pieces of the puzzle that's going to help you to find your purpose. And for the longest while, I didn't understand what that meant. But as time went on, I started to really understand that the pain and the negativity that I was putting out, it showed me that I had the ability to put out that level of energy. So if I could put out that level of energy on the negative side, then I could turn it around and put out the same level of energy on the positive side. And so I decided, rather than going out and seeking revenge, to turn things around and actually go out there and, become who I am today, the speaker, the author, the podcast host, the person who's trying to make change, not just within the city, but within the world. And at that time, there was a time that I really believed that if I was out with my cousin Omar, I could have prevented his murder. And, I was thinking irrationally, but I do look at it now and say, I couldn't prevent his murder, but perhaps with the words that I speak, maybe I can prevent the next shooting. Perhaps with one of my social media motivational posts, perhaps I can prevent the next young girl's teenage pregnancy. Perhaps I can prevent the next child who wants to drop out of school. Perhaps I can prevent the next suicide. And so I realized that my value was bigger than just that circumstance, no matter how difficult it was to lose my cousin Omar in such a tragic event. I recognized that my value was bigger. And so that's really what led me along the path of making change, striving to make change within our community, because I didn't want another family to have to go through what I went through. And I didn't want to have another young person to believe that that was the only path for them. Because I do believe that Omar's shooters, they were young just like he was. And so they at some point were led down a path to believe that there was no other options. And I want our children to recognize, and our adults to recognize, that there were other options out there. And so that's what's led me to where I am today. That's why I strive and do what I do. That's why my purpose is to, to make change. It's bigger than me. It's bigger than me. I'm just a vessel, and I use that every single day. I'm blessed to use that power every single day to make change.
If you enjoy listening to the show, be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you get automatic updates of new episodes every Tuesday. Also, leave a review and let other people know what you think of the show. Don't forget to follow Woke Mommy Chatter at Woke Mommy on Twitter, on Instagram, and follow along on Facebook at Woke Mommy Chatter. Be sure to visit the Woke Mommy Chatter website at www.wokemommychatter.com to help support the production of the podcast.
Thanks for listening to Woke Mommy Chatter.